Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and masked triangle-faced cult members. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at 2016's The Void. The Void follows Deputy Daniel Carter and a small group of locals as they are trapped in a hospital by a group of cloaked cultists, only to find out the real terror is inside. This Canadian feature was written and directed by Stephen Kostanski and Jeremy Gillespie, two members of Astron 6, a film production and directing company known for their low-budget 80s-centric movies that often combine horror and comedy, such as Manborg, Father's Day, and The Editor. Gillespie's original intention was to create a Lovecraft film in a way that hadn't been done before. While I won't say the movie as a whole is the most original thing I've seen, I also won't say that's necessarily a bad thing. It packs in a ton of Lovecraft-inspired imagery as well as inspiration from John Carpenter, Clive Barker, George Romero, Lucio Fulci, and many other 80s horror influences. That and its practical effects help it to stand out from the slew of 80s homages we've seen in the 2010s. So it's a movie made for people like me. Accurately being described as a nostalgic rush, The Void sits at a 78 and a 47 on Rotten Tomatoes, landing a bit better with critics than general audiences. The plot is pretty thin, and there's very little in the explanation department, some of which I think is intentional and some not so much. The movie touches on a ton of different themes, but doesn't go too far into any of them, and it also just deals with some of the issues of contemporary low-budget horror. But what The Void has going for it most is its constant intensity. The movie is literally always uncomfortable, tense, horrifying, infuriating, or just batshit crazy. It rarely gives the viewer a break. On that note, I do want to warn my photosensitive viewers, this movie does have an excessive amount of flashing and strobing lights. There will be a written warning up top and it will stay there until the flashing ends. With that, let's see what we can find in The Void. As I said, this movie starts off incredibly tense as we pan from a dead body to a door with a spray-painted triangle as a man runs from the house. Another woman flees but is shot in the back with a shotgun. A man, and who we presume is his son, douse the woman in gasoline and light her on fire with a cigarette. As they hop in their car to go after the man, they don't notice a cloaked figure with a triangle to match the door. The triangle symbol, while getting expanded a little bit later, was one of the aspects of the cult that directors wanted to keep intentionally vague, as it's an image that already has a ton of history and symbology and religion, so viewers can make their own determinations about it. The credits bring us to Deputy Sheriff Daniel Carter, played by Aaron Poole, snoozing and chatting with dispatch when he notices the guy from earlier emerge from the woods and collapse. He assumes he's just drunk, but upon further examination rushes him to Marsh County Memorial Hospital. The hospital recently had a fire that damaged most of the building, so it is virtually empty while it transfers to its new location. Daniel drags the man in where his estranged, more on that later, wife Allison is at the front desk. Another nurse named Bev brings out a stretcher and takes him to see Dr. Powell. We also meet Kim, an intern who is really annoyed she got stuck in this lame small-town hospital as she pesters a sleepy patient. Daniel greets Ben and his very pregnant granddaughter Maggie, but heads back when he hears the man screaming. The guy, who we now know is named James, really wants to be released and Dr. Powell sedates him. The doctor discusses their limited resources, and Allison notices he's no stranger to needles. Daniel and Allison have a friendly but awkward conversation before being interrupted by the doctor, played by genre veteran Kenneth Walsh. He tells Daniel to be gentle with her, as she is still coming to terms with the loss of their unborn daughter. The doctor also lost his daughter Sarah, so he knows just how hard that loss is. Daniel is heading back up front when he hears Bev crying, and holy fucking shit, she killed the sleepy guy. Bev, I don't think that's how you give an eye exam. And she cut off her own face. Bev wants to give Daniel a little stabby as well and gets a swift bullet where her face used to be. The shots get the attention of, well, everyone, and Daniel explains what happened before heading to the restroom to control his quivering and nausea, where he eventually passes out. While unconscious, he has visions of a cosmic, barren landscape and some fleshy stuff, but he is woken up by the doctor and Allison. They believe he had a seizure, but Daniel is a stubborn bastard and announces he is fine. Allison tells him a state trooper is here now in relation to James. This rustic gentleman is Mitchell, and he tells Daniel that James is responsible for a bloodbath not far from here. He confiscates Daniel's gun and also hypothesizes that James somehow drugged Bev. Daniel finally goes to call in the shooting, but what do you know, the phones aren't working. He heads out to his car, but his radio is down too. I wonder if this scary motherfucker knows anything about it. Daniel approaches the figure when a loud foghorn kinda noise goes off, and the hospital's outdoor lights go out. The figure charges Daniel and gets him to the ground, getting just the tip of his big-ass knife into Daniel before getting knocked off. But Cloaky Boy brought some friends, scaring Daniel right back inside. We check in on Bev to see that she has some thing tentacles coming out of her face. Daniel is bleeding badly, and the terrified Kim helps Powell put pressure on the wound while Allison goes to get a suture kit. Daniel has another cosmic fleshy vision and awakens to find that the doctor stopped the bleeding. The hospital is now surrounded by the cloaked figures, and Mitchell also couldn't call for help. James is awake now and starts screaming his ass off, and Mitchell and Daniel find this. Bev is a goddamn monster now. The cops are rightfully shook, but manage to get James out of there. Sneaky James grabs a scalpel while they aren't looking. Smart move, because before Mitchell and Daniel can explain what happened, the father and son from the intro shoot past the cult and get inside. The dad immediately has his gun on James, who is using Maggie as a shield. Everybody is screaming, and we can hear the Bev monsters breaking out of the room. All of the actors and actresses in The Void bring a ton of intensity to every single scene. Aaron Poole even went kind of into a method acting approach, even going to the lengths of breaking things and screaming to get hyped up before a scene. The doctor tries to talk James into letting Maggie go, but James isn't ready to give up his pregnant shield and stabs the old doctor in the neck. Luckily, old man Ben can sneak attack the scalpel-wielding lunatic and knock him out. Mitchell, on the other hand, gets sneak attacked by the Bev monster right behind him and gets dragged away. Daniel follows and finds the monster giving Mitchell an eye exam. Still not sure that's how you do it, Bev. She bitch slaps Daniel away, and the father and son show up to help. The son starts chopping away with his axe just as Bev starts growing, new something, and Pops blows whatever it was to shit. Bev starts screaming, and the father grabs Daniel's axe, and the father and son duo chop at this beautiful creature for a really long time. It's like an entire minute of them just straight chopping. The father chops off Mitchell's head, and the beast finally appears to be dead. You can get up now, Daniel, the monster is vanquished. Shout out to everyone on the special effects team. Oh shit, the doctor's dead. The man is immediately back on his hunt for James and gives Daniel a proper bop in the nose for getting in his way. The father isn't willing to trust anyone, citing his son's cut neck, which was done by James and his associates, leaving the boy unable to speak. Pops tries to bash Daniel's head in, but the son thankfully stops him. For now, a very stressful truce is formed, and together they wheel the Bev monster outside to burn in one of the very few comedic scenes. Back to the pregnancy plot, Maggie is in a lot of pain and Allison is worried she may need to perform a C-section. The hospital is not properly equipped for that, but she wants to check out the med supply room, which is in another wing of the hospital. Daniel does not like the idea and tries to make it a guilt thing in relation to their baby, but she makes it very clear that Maggie and her baby will die if she does not get these supplies. Daniel approaches the father and son and asks if they will help him retrieve his shotgun from the car, which they agree to if they can keep the shotgun. The cult, either with magic or manpower, moved Daniel's cruiser to the far edge of the parking lot, but the boys say fuck it and go anyway. Allison comforts a worried Maggie and heads to the supply room, which I thought she was supposed to wait to do until they had the shotgun. I'm not sure, but either way, going alone is obviously a death wish. Allison is grabbing supplies and it looks like the old doctor is still ticking. The son loads up Daniel's trunk, including some flares, so we have that to look forward to. Daniel is having trouble releasing the shotgun and turns on his police lights, revealing a bunch of culty boys not too far away. One sneaks up behind the son and cuts his hand, but Daniel finally gets the shotgun and blasts him away, also announcing he's keeping the gun. They return and find Allison is missing, and Daniel and the father go to find her, and after swinging their dicks some more, they notice the doctor's body is gone. Back to the spooky part of the building, they at least find Mitchell's gun. Allison obviously isn't in the supply room, but Daniel grabs the bag she had filled up. Daniel hears the phone ringing, and what do you know, it's the fucking doctor. Powell knows Daniel has been having visions and offers to show him more, while the father rifles through some cult orgy Polaroids and more culty writings. The doctor talks about loss. He says he is going to help them all. Daniel and the boys are going to the abandoned part of the hospital to search for Allison, and Kim is freaking out because she doesn't know how to deliver a baby. He assures her they will be back with Allison and the people outside won't get in, but he's gonna give the old guy a gun just in case. The father is skeptical of going down there and wants to gain some intel from the still unconscious James. Threatened with the smashing of a finger, he tells them it's the doctor and he did them a favor by killing him, but is horrified to hear he isn't exactly dead. James met a girl on the road who offered him crystal, but she brought him to the doctor who did give him drugs, but he also watched them have orgies and make them kill people. They decide to bring James along on their journey to the basement. With Kim giving directions via radio, they head on down, but there isn't a door where there should be, and there's just more corridors, and there's another staircase going down. I would just try my luck with the dudes outside at this point. Luckily they have James to go first in case there's monsters. The boys enter a new room, one with lots of culty drawings, and James recognizes it. He says what's down here is worse than anything they've seen so far, which made me really excited to see it. Around this point, the movie cuts between groups a lot, and I'm going to kind of conjoin their sequences a bit so I'm not switching back and forth every other sentence. We rejoin Allison, who has been paralyzed by the doctor. He talks about the sensation of being killed and continues to talk about the loss of his daughter and how he wanted to bring her back when she died. He compares his process to a caterpillar and a cocoon and admits he has made many mistakes, which still live down here in the basement, and they are the ones who caused the fire that destroyed the hospital in an attempt to kill themselves. He tries to convince Allison that this way is better, an end to death, going on to describe the details of her unborn baby's death. He plans to bring his daughter back tonight and shows off his new skinless face to Allison, and reveals to her some horrible creature that is inside of her, ready to be birthed. The boys find a door with one of those trademark triangles and waltz on in. And oh boy, James did not let me down. At first it seems nothing here is alive, that is until this handsome gentleman makes his presence known, and just like that they all spring to life. They start blasting and hacking through these things, and in the chaos the father starts seeing visions of a woman and a baby, revealing he too has lost a child. He follows the apparition while the others keep fighting the monsters. Daniel grabs James and drags him to a different room. Stupid ass James attacks Daniel, giving this bendy motherfucker enough time to grab him and smash his fucking face in. That amazing body movement was done by Troy James, an actor and contortionist they created this monster specifically for. Meanwhile, Kim has had to sedate Maggie and upon finding a lot of blood realizes she may indeed need a C-section. They hear the front glass break and Ben tries to convince the terrified Kim to do it while he defends the office, but Ben receives a sudden slash to his throat, courtesy of his own granddaughter. She's in on whatever the fuck is going on and reveals the baby belongs to Dr. Powell. Ugh. She tells Kim not to worry and heads off with a couple triangle faces in the Giallo lit hospital. She tries to run for it but finds cultists in around every corner. She eventually hides in a vent. The son finds the father talking to himself and gets attacked by him. They both see the dead mother and baby and are fighting inside their home now. The father blames the son for their deaths and says they are going to stay here with them. The son burns him with a flare and snaps him back to reality. Daniel hears Allison calling and finds her in Powell's operating room. They have a sweet reunion that seems more like a memory of their actual pregnancy until the lights shift and the doctor speaks to him subconsciously. He knows Daniel's dirty little secret. He was relieved when the baby died, which has shamed him to this very day. Oh, by the way, some sort of tentacles have bursted out of Allison in glorious, disgusting fashion. We zoom away as he hacks up his wife in one of the more somber scenes in the movie. The doctor transports him to a new room with a glowing outline of a triangle. The doctor is disappointed Daniel still doesn't see his vision. Then Daniel gets a stabby from Maggie and falls to the floor. And we get to see Powell's final form, and he is excited to have Daniel as his audience. Powell speaks some ancient chant and the triangle opens, releasing a bright white light. The doctor requests this higher power to place his daughter inside Maggie's baby. She gets a vision of what's to come, finally realizing she's a brainwashed fucking idiot. And bam! A beautiful baby girl is born. Luckily, the father and son have jumped back into action and start a blastin'. Baby no like that and follows them back to the scary red room. Fuck, this thing is cool. She grabs them with her tentacles, but the son gets away, and the dad shoots it point blank in the face with a shotgun. But that's not enough to take her down, and more tentacles start to penetrate the father. Realizing it's over for him, he douses himself and the fetus monster in gasoline. After a bit of hesitation, the son lights a flare and sets them ablaze, crawling into a vent to get the fuck out of there. Daniel struggles to get up and grabs an axe while Powell stands around and prophesizes. Then he fucking evaporates, looking at what he calls the astral plane, and we see a big black pyramid. But Powell is brought back when Daniel chops his shoulder with the axe, but that doesn't seem to do too much, and Powell offers to bring back Alston. All he has to do is die for him. Oh, that's all? No biggie. Daniel considers it, but he starts thinking about the real Alston and decides an end is better than some grotesque rotten forever. He grabs the doctor and pushes his way into the void. This upsets the triangle and the portal closes and the building starts shaking. The son crawls out of the vent and damn it, the fetus monster is still after him. They are running down a long corridor that starts closing in and he barely makes it out, leaving the creature to be squished off screen. Out of that weird underground layer, it appears everything up top is okay. Well, in comparison. Dawn breaks and the young man finds dead old man Ben. He hears a noise and sees one of Powell's disciples was killed with an extinguisher that he grabs. Don't worry guy, it's just Kim who somehow survived to the end of this movie. The movie ends in that cosmic realm where we see Daniel and Alston looking at the giant pyramid. Not sure how Alston ended up there, but that's okay, the movie's over. So that's The Void. I don't know if you could tell, but I fucking love this movie. It's so intense, the practical effects are exactly what I wanted them to be, and it just has so many wonderful callbacks to great 80s horror. Some people may not enjoy the vagueness of it all, but I personally don't mind not being spoon-fed information with a ton of exposition dumps. I think any more specificity in the cult or Powell's experiments would at the very best not make a difference, but at the very worst just bog the movie down. All the information that needs to be there is there. All of the actors do a solid job. At times they were meant to frustrate the audience, at times they're supposed to make us feel so depressed, and they succeed at both of those things. There is this interesting theme of loss and guilt, specifically in relation to losing a child, which Daniel and Alston did, Powell did, the father did, and I assume Ben did as he's caring for Maggie, and technically I'd say Maggie did as well. The only two who didn't were Kim and the son, and maybe even Mitchell and Bev, but don't worry about them. The closest thing I can take away as a moral from this horrifying story is to accept the guilt and pain in your life and not run from it, but also not to stew in it and let it eat you up inside. Powell and Daniel were like two ends of a spectrum. Daniel just kept pushing ahead through all of the pain, ignoring his injuries both physically and mentally, whereas Dr. Powell refused the pain and stopped, and just worked towards changing it, becoming stuck as this undead monstrosity. And from my perspective, neither end of that spectrum is quite right. It needs to be somewhere in the middle. I've touched on it a little bit, but it's really amazing how much this cast and crew got done with such a limited budget. There's a really awesome behind the scenes video that I used some footage from, and everyone involved had a really tough time but also a really fun time. The monsters in the void are some of my favorites I've watched in a long time, and probably in my top 10 monsters of the 2010s, and the fact they are almost entirely practical is amazing to see. We have gotten so many 80s themed or inspired horror movies and TV shows in the past 5 or so years, but I've noticed with a lot of them that the monsters aren't really the focus of the story, it's more so on the cast, and the monsters are often CGI or at least unnecessarily CGI enhanced, which I think is just a disservice to the 80s and their amazing practical effects. I want more gritty, dark, unpleasant, realistic horror. I don't want more funny quips and fan service. A cool monster is my version of fan service. Practical effects reign over CGI 9 out of 10 times. The monsters in the void are a little clunky, but generally look 10 times better than the Demogorgon or CGI Pennywise, because they are real, they are actually there in the space. That's an actual guy in this big ass monster costume getting chopped with fake axes. You don't see that much these days. Okay, old man rant over. It's not a perfect movie. I think the father character was written to be just a little bit too difficult and antagonistic. A little bit more of those crazy basement monsters would have been cool, and the end where Daniel and Allison are in the other world is meh. I think she should have just stayed dead. And where the fuck did Powell go? But those are really my only complaints for the movie, and I really did enjoy it. It's kind of simple in its purpose and premise, but it succeeds greatly at what it tries to do, and I highly recommend it, if for nothing else, just for the great practical effects. Well, that's about it. Thanks so much for watching. Next week we're going to be looking at one of my other new favorite monster movies, The Ritual. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and this has been Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of The Void. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch all of my future content. And be sure to go check me out on Instagram and Patreon if you want to support the channel further. Thanks y'all, stay safe out there.